The anti-boycott law is, I think, one of the most profoundly influential and special events that have happened in the last, well, as long as I can remember covering the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The boycott campaign, which is really a representation of the internationalization of nonviolent Palestinian resistance, has gained so much steam and kind of notoriety that it's forcing the Israelis into action. For a long time in Israel, the argument was, boycott is not effective. Israel's a strong economy. We don't have to, pay attention to these crazy UK-based activists that are running around not buying our tomatoes. And this worked in the Israeli mindset for a long time. When Israel decided to effectively cancel its freedom of speech and expression, it put all of these issues to bed. It has demonstrated how effective these campaigns are, because democracies don't stop freedom of speech if these things aren't effective. So, in terms of the details, and me personally, as an American who now lives in Israel, this is a completely unusual and shocking experience to be confronted with in terms of my own civil liberties. Basically, it works like this. As an Israeli citizen, I am, if I support the boycott openly in any sort of international venue, in a newspaper, on this tape right now, if I do that, and I do it in, say, like a pinpointed way. Let's say I say, the settlers in Hebron are the most violent form of Israeli settlers that are in the West Bank. They're over-the-top crazy, and any product from Hebron should be boycotted absolutely as a matter of conscience for the international community. If I say that on this tape, which incidentally I will say that as an individual, I think that is a factual statement. I think it's a legitimate statement, and settlers in Hebron notice it. They can sue me in a civil court, not a criminal court, for economic damage. Now, what makes the law so absolutely insane is that they don't have to actually prove that they were damaged. They only have to prove that I intended to damage them. Now, this is an absolute attack on free speech. I mean, there's no other way around it. In fact, a lot of American Jewish leaders, like the Israeli, pro-Israeli cheerleader Abraham Foxman of the Anti-Defamation League, even came out very critical of this law because it makes defending Israeli democracy, or what Israelis call the democracy, very, very difficult. And yet it is, I think, a very hopeful time, because it's showing how effective these movements are and things like that. One other example in terms of how it's playing out, it hasn't been tested yet. It is official law inside of Israeli society, but it hasn't been implemented. But on the website that I write for occasionally and help start, 972, we were having for a period a debate about the boycott. I was supporting the boycott, the cultural academic boycott, openly in my commentary on the site. Unfortunately, no one else, none of my other writers were willing to support this initiative. But after the law was passed, we are not in a position in which we can discuss any of these issues openly. Now, we could discuss why the boycott is bad, but as a site that's trying to engender some sort of debate, we're not going to have just one side present, because any sort of even minor lawsuit would shut down our project. And so this is where you're actually seeing self-censorship as a result of this law. And I wish that I could sit here and say this is the only law that's being passed in this kind of realm, but this is just one of many laws that are being passed that are specifically targeting leftist dissent, any sort of mild connection with the Palestinian cause, and especially Palestinian nonviolence. And so it really demonstrates the effectivity of Palestinian nonviolence and the internationalization of that nonviolence. The waves of suicide bombings that engulfed Israel during the Second Intifada never succeeded in having Israel cancel its own freedom of speech. And yet the boycott campaign, completely and 100% nonviolent, has done that. Now, obviously that's not the goal of the boycott campaign, but it demonstrates how effective these models of thinking are on the ground and internationally.